hearty welcome to one and all. This is episode 109 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for joining me on this rainy Tuesday here in New York. Heaven forbid we had a couple of days where it didn't rain, and here we go again. Been storming the whole day, and we're supposed to get rain tomorrow and Thursday, and Mother Nature is mocking us here in New York. But if you're checking out episode 109 on the YouTube channel or enjoying the content, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, and turn on those notifications. Or if you're checking out episode 109 on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, click like, subscribe, turn on those notifications. So today will be another in the continuing series of the best film you've never seen. This time, I'm more confident that you haven't seen the movie that I'm going to focus on. But I want to start off by saying a positive development, if you will, in the last number of years, the number of great documentary series that have been produced, whether it's directly for streaming or whether it's just feature documentaries that more people have kind of gotten into, and the kind of big blow up of what is known as true crime. I'm not okay with there being so many horrendous cases of true crime and murders and horrible conspiracies and cover-ups and just awful shit. But I am on board with a new generation of younger people embracing the documentary format, even in terms of a mini series, whatever it might be. When I got to New York University in the fall of 1994, almost 30 years ago, didn't watch any documentaries my first semester. The courses I took included silent screen, didn't really watch any documentaries unless, Meshes of the Afternoon, maybe. Is that really a documentary? Don't think we saw any docus in that particular class. Didn't watch any documentaries in the horror film. Didn't watch any documentaries in language of film. We watched Luis Buñuel's Land Without Bread, which is a pretty grim story set in a Central American country where everyone is pretty much starving to death. Very, very harrowing stuff. But in the next semester, my second semester at New York University, spring 1995, so it would be ongoing now 29 years ago. 29 fucking years ago. In the immortal words of Clint Eastwood at the beginning of Dirty Harry, when he realizes he's probably up against a serial killer. Jesus. In this particular class called American Film, 1975 to 1990, it sounds like ancient history right now, because the first year, 1975, is just about 5 decades ago. And the second, 34 years. But in the Stone Ages of 1995, 1975 to 1990, relatively recent history. It would be like having a class now that goes until 2019. We're going to have a class from 2004 movies to 2019 movies. That is the literal equivalent of sitting there in March or January or February, April or May of 1995 and taking a class called American Film 1975 to 1990. But the documentaries that we watched in that class, we saw a kind of, I guess you would call it a feminist film. I didn't quite I don't think it was actually a documentary. It was a cross between a documentary and not a documentary. It's called Born in Flames. Very difficult time following it. I just don't think that I had the head for it. 21-year-old me was still focused on a million other things that had nothing to do with what was right in front of me. I would always get distracted. There was an attractive lady sitting next to me. I might be worried about that instead of watching the movie. We watched The Times of Harvey Milk in that class. I only knew about the Harvey Milk story a little bit. It was a very, very difficult watch. And the movie with Sean Penn and James Franco, among others, very well done. The documentary is really, really good. Watch another documentary, highly recommended, which you can find on streaming. I think it's on Max. Paris is Burning. And the filmmaker, was her name Livingston? I think the name of the filmmaker is Jenny Livingston, but let me double check. So Paris is Burning, in a sense, was the forerunner for RuPaul's Drag Race. And I'm not exaggerating. Yes, Jenny Livingston. So I did get that right. It's funny, but it also deals with very serious themes of inclusion, exclusion, equality, justice, injustice, and people just trying to live their best lives and getting fucked repeatedly by a society that doesn't even want them to have the autonomy to do that. It's set in the late 1980s, early 90s, in kind of where you know how there's Broadway and there's off-Broadway and off-Broadway? There's culture, there's counterculture, and then there is a kind of sub-counterculture. And Paris is Burning deals with a sub-counterculture, masquerade balls and drag balls. And some people who just enjoyed what is commonly referred to as cross-dressing, but then there were people who were transitioning, and it goes into all of this. And the film is pretty amazing that it manages to keep a light tone while the very serious shit and some of the tragic stuff is happening in the margins. The movie is extraordinary. And honestly, as a sort of angry, edgy, incessantly complaining 21-year-old, I needed to be exposed to material like this. I needed to understand, bro, you have it so much better than you ever imagined, because you can't see more than a foot in front of your own face. You can't see past whatever your own issues are on this particular day to actually take stock of someone other than yourself. Movies such as Paris is Burning opened my eyes in the best possible ways to understand just how many advantages I have over a lot of other people and groups of people. Eyes wide open, not eyes wide shut. Sorry, Stanley. Sorry, Tom. Sorry, Nicole. Sorry, Sidney Pollack. Sorry, Harvey Keitel, who was supposed to play the Ziegler part before Sidney Pollack, but I digress. Those were all fantastic films and documentaries. And bear in mind, what Professor Sklar, the late, great Bob Sklar, former Los Angeles Times reporter, who ended up being at times the chairman of the New York University Cinema Studies Department. What a guy. Fucking genius. But he split it up between documentaries, successful independent films, and Hollywood features, because we also watched Blade Runner and Taxi Driver and Blue Velvet in that class. Blue Velvet was very popular. I watched that in 3 different classes. We saw it in film theory. I mean, that's a little bit more obvious. But the movie I'm going to focus on here is a film I mentioned in a previous podcast. And the reason why this particular cassette tape, the only VHS tape I am currently in possession of, everything else was Deep Six during the move. It didn't survive the move, ladies and gentlemen. Errol Morris, extraordinary 1988 documentary, the first true crime documentary, and a movie I always recommend to people who say they like true crime. This is the OG. This changed the game. It also changed the nature of documentaries because Morris did certain things that somehow the movie wasn't eligible to be nominated for Best Documentary. Do you know how rare it is for a film that is widely seen to get 100% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes? There are all-time great movies that do not have 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. The Thin Blue Line has a 100% score on Rotten Tomatoes. And we're talking reviews collected all the way back to 1988 when Roger Ebert hit the ceiling and Gene Siskel and other critics of the day hit the ceiling. Holy fuck, we've never seen anything like this. The Thin Blue Line Errol Morris, groundbreaking, pioneering, landmark documentary on a closed capital murder case in Dallas, Texas, in which Errol Morris, Long Island native, from the 5 towns, Hewlett, 100% certain Errol Morris knew my grandfather, 100%. If I could ever meet Errol Morris, I would say, I'm quite certain you went into Woodmere Lanes at some point in your life. Do you remember Old Man Nat? I don't know when they started calling him Old Man Nat, but apparently that's what my grandfather was known as, even though he wasn't that old. He looked older. What can I say? But Errol Morris, Long Island native, from Hewlett, New York, one town over from Woodmere, where I spent a lot of my formative years in that bowling alley, Woodmere Bowling Lanes and Backstage Club, still there, by the way, still thriving. Errol Morris made this extraordinary film, which he started off to do a different film. Now, Morris had already made a couple of documentaries which got very wide acclaim. Famously made a movie called Gates of Heaven about a really preposterous, of all things, a pet cemetery scandal. And we don't mean Stephen King Pet Cemetery. I mean a real-life pet cemetery scandal where people were taking money and not burying the pets. What the fuck? In the immortal words of Rodney Dangerfield, I already gave you a Clint Eastwood, the immortal words of Rodney Dangerfield. The questions get harder as we go. If somebody pays you to bury their pet, bury their pet. What the fuck? Gates of Heaven was a documentary that the great Werner Herzog, when he met young Errol Morris and Morris told him about, I'm going to make a movie about a pet cemetery, when Werner Herzog said, I love you, kid. You're not ever going to make this movie. Here's $20. Good luck. Gave him $20. I'll help you fund your film. Here, do I get a piece of it? You're not ever going to make this movie because nobody's going to be dumb enough to fund you. But if you are able to make this movie, I will eat my shoe at the premiere of your choice. It's exactly what happened. Errol Morris made the extraordinary documentary, one of Roger Ebert's 10 favorite documentaries of all time, up there with Hoop Dreams, among others. And Werner Herzog, a man of his word, the man who plays the Zek in the Tom Cruise Jack Reacher movie. If you've seen it, that scary guy with white hair, that's Werner Herzog, the phenomenal, insane, fucking lunatic German filmmaker. A crazy man who did some crazy things in his career to make his own movies. But he appreciated a kindred spirit in Errol Morris, a man who was not going to take no for an answer. I'm making this movie about Pet Sematary. I'm going to do it. All right, kid, good luck. Here's your $20. Errol Morris ended up getting Werner Herzog to fillet and saute his shoe and eat it in front of the cameras. Literally eating his words and eating his soul, S-O-L-E, if you'll excuse the horrible pun. So Errol Morris was a name within the documentary field. He was somebody who was already considered a very, very intense and serious talent around the time of The Thin Blue Line. And great art doesn't always unfold in a linear fashion. Sometimes, as in the case with Michael Moore, with Roger and Me, he knew exactly the movie he was going to set out to make. And he may have been, more that is, bounced around and certain topics he de-emphasized that he thought maybe were going to be a more primary focus. I mean, that's art. You know, Terrence Malick making The Thin Red Line and shooting the film where Adrian Brody is the main character, and then in post-production, Adrian Brody is cut almost entirely out of the film. And the movie focuses more on the characters played by Jim Caviezel and Sean Penn. George Clooney, supposedly, in production, had a much bigger role. You watch the movie and you're waiting for George Clooney, 3 hours in, there he is. He's there for about 2 minutes. Shit happens. Sometimes the focus shifts as you're making it, and other times it shifts when you are done making it. Number 5, the greatest movie you've never seen. Errol Morris, The Thin Red Line. Morris started out making a movie about a psychiatrist in the employ of the Dallas County Police Department, a man by the name of Greekson. Greekson's nickname was Dr. Death. Remember some of the Gen Xers who were wrestling fans. There was a wrestler, Steve Williams, whose nickname was Dr. Death. And I knew of that guy, and when we're watching this movie in Professor Sklar's class, and I had not seen the Thin Blue Line, when they mentioned that there's this guy, Dr. Death, and I'm fucking cracking up. I'm like, what, Steve Williams? And a couple of the guys next to me knew who I was saying. They're cracking up. Dr. Death, Steve Williams, Dr. Death. Professor McElhaney has to put his hand down to shut us up because we got so excited, Dr. Death. It's Steve Williams in this movie. No, it's not. Fucking idiots. Shh. So Errol Morris had read about the psychiatrist Griegson, or Dr. Death, who had an unblemished record. He was the guy who would interview people on death row and offer his learned medical professional opinion as to whether the condemned prisoner could be redeemed even to the point where we don't have to execute them now or 6 months from now. If we keep him in solitary, we don't have to worry. No one else is going to die. Griegson, every patient that he interviewed as part of this process, what do we need to do with this particular prisoner, this condemned prisoner? He gave the same verdict to every single person he talked to. Kill him. 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 35, 36, I don't know what the exact number is, but every single condemned man on death row in Dallas County, he said, we don't have a choice. We got to kill him. He's too far gone. We can't even rehabilitate him within the context of him being in solitary and not realistically a threat to anyone, even himself. Kill him. So Errol Morris starts to make a movie about this Dr. Death. Sounds like it could kind of be funny. And Morris was not something that he would completely dismiss, the idea of, because some of his documentaries get into some serious shit, but if you actually assess them, pretty fucking funny. This movie's not one of them. But there was potential for dark humor if he had ended up making that movie. Well, while Errol Morris was interviewing various inmates and people connected to the Dallas County Police Department, interviewing witnesses in some of the murder cases where these people ended up on death row, Errol Morris meets a man by the name of Randall Adams as part of his research into his Dr. Death documentary. And he asks Randall Adams, in his case, well, what happened when you met with Dr. Griegson? What did he ask you? What did you talk about? And the way that Randall Adams, the kind of flat, disaffected, unaffected way that Randall Adams is answering the questions is unlike any of the other people, prisoners, death row inmates, that he's spoken to. So he pokes a little further and asks a few questions of Randall Adams, which strays from the topic at hand. And he starts to get the idea that Randall Adams hasn't killed anybody. You're here on a murder rap? And a career criminal who is currently in prison for a different crime, which was also a serious crime with a deadly weapon? It sounds like that's the guy that killed this cop that you are in here and you're going to be executed for? Errol Morris switched midstream. All the work that he had done to make the Griegson Dr. Death documentary. He said, no. We're not doing this. Nope. No, sir. We're not doing this. This is a live wire here. This man, Randall Adams, didn't kill anybody. He's rotting away on death row and they are going to set a date to kill him? He didn't kill anybody. He was railroaded. It's not even accurate to say that he was framed. In this instance, it's more that he was railroaded. There was no evidence fixed against him. They simply decided to charge him with a crime that they knew damn well he did not do. The likely perpetrator had a family which was connected, and he was in, a lot of people liked him, even though he kept getting arrested. Well, David's a nice kid. So Errol Morris buried himself in this terrible case of a Dallas police officer who was shot to death. And the police officer's partner, who probably didn't follow protocol and may have been able to identify the assailant if she had not been out of position. There was a lot of really bad stuff that took place the night that this police officer was killed. And I want to give the name of the police officer because it's very important. Wood. Robert Woods. I was going to say Woods. That was the name of the police officer who died. And so Errol Morris did dozens of interviews with people from Randall Adams, the guy on death row, David Harris, who the movie very strongly indicates this is the guy that committed that murder, and every eyewitness who said that Randall Adams was the killer. And every one of them was either paid or they were, in other words, paid for their testimony, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, or they were flat out making shit up. They were telling the prosecution, in this case, what they wanted to hear. Morris did all these interviews, and based on the interviews, he reconstructed the crime from about 7 or 8 different perspectives, depending on who's telling the story. And the more you watch these reenactments, the more you listen to the people who put their hand on the good book and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Every one of those people were full of shit. They didn't care. Just didn't care. Because somebody's got to go down for this. Why not a 27-year-old drifter? Doesn't really have much in the way of a regular life. He doesn't have a great job. He certainly doesn't have any connection to Dallas. He was just kind of in the wrong place at the wrong time. Fuck him. As we watch the movie, we realize very early on that there has been a miscarriage of justice. We just don't know how horrendous it is. There are so many cases of misconduct, abuse, things happen. It's not always this, because we've seen it. And the recent documentary, which I thought was amazing on Netflix, American Nightmare, which shows in that particular instance, police and FBI all but dismissing the possibility that the crime that actually happened. And they just decided, no, it's this person who did it. There's no evidence. We don't care. This kind of crime only happens and it's only done by the boyfriend. He did it. There's no evidence he did it, and there's evidence. Shut up. So that kind of thing still happens. In a world of this story, this true story, it's worse because there wasn't any reason for it. But the idea was, in this particular time in Dallas County, the race was not for justice. The race was simply to close the case. Because they didn't have any murder cases that lasted more than a month, or they had some kind of dumb statistics that they explained. Oh yeah, we always close the cases fast. It seems that that's all they cared about. Just close the case. We don't care if we're going to put an innocent man into the fucking gas chamber. We're going to gas him. We're going to electrocute him. Hell, maybe we'll get a firing squad. Let's do that. They didn't give a shit. They just wanted to close the case. Let's not get the feds involved. Let's keep them out there. We got this. Morris finished his film, this extraordinary, horrifying story, a true crime nightmare of a very obvious case of not even rush to judgment, not even a mistaken identity, just a flat out, nobody gives a shit. A flat out, we don't care about this person. We know he didn't do it. Tough shit. It is as horrifying as anything you will see. Never less than riveting. And the beauty of art, the beauty and the magic of movies, whether fictional film based on fact, or documentaries such as this, which is unconventional in that most documentaries don't do reenactments. And that was a little bit of the controversy when many people were up in arms saying, hey, Errol Morris should have been nominated. There was something that needed to be changed in the rules. Nowadays, this film would be nominated, again, assuming that the critical reception was the same. But the beauty and terror and occasional extraordinary magic of movies is their ability to literally change history all by themselves. And when Errol Morris's The Thin Blue Line landed in 1988, Randall Adams' murder conviction was overturned. Randall Adams was on death row waiting to be executed. And because of the efforts of Long Island native, brilliant documentarian, top 5 greatest documentarians ever. There are others that would say, no, he's number 1. Doesn't matter. Everybody respects him. He won an Oscar for The Fog of War 15 years after this. The Thin Blue Line freed an innocent man, got him off of death row, and allowed him to go back to a normal life. If Errol Morris had not started poking around the Dallas County and some of the stuff that didn't make sense to him with, well, how could every single person on death row, they can't just live out their sentence, they all have to die? It's kind of ghastly. And that is good substance for a documentary, absolutely. But nothing like this. Nothing like knowing in your heart, this man is going to die. He just was in the wrong place at the wrong time. They know who the killer was. How could they allow this to happen? Well, Errol Morris put up his hand, a la Kevin Costner in Man of Steel, when Henry Cavill wants to save his father's life, and Costner, as Pa Kent, no. Errol Morris put his hand up, Dallas County, ready to execute Randall Adams, and said, no. No, thank you. We're not doing that. This movie changed history and showed again what was possible. That great art can move mountains, can alter the course of time. You can tell how much affection I hold for this particular film, and not just because the filmmaker is a fellow Long Islander. But let's face it, there are so many great filmmakers grew up on Long Island, New York. I would be saying the same if this were a filmmaker from Flint, Michigan, like Michael Moore, or a Barbara Koppel, or any number of other fantastic documentarians who are not from New York. But this movie, the best movie you've never seen, another in the series, number 5, is streaming free on 2 platforms as we speak. I know it's streaming free on Tubi, which it's an ad-supported format, but it's not like Pluto where you get blasted 5 minutes of ads for every 10 minutes of actually watching your program. There might be a few ads. For some people, Tubi, you can do all the ads at the beginning of the film. It's not a big deal. It is on AMC Plus, which some people get bundled with Paramount, so you might have to check on that. And it is available as a $2 rental on Amazon Prime. It gets my highest recommendation, especially if you're into true crime. This is the OG true crime documentary. An hour and 40 minutes of sheer horror that turns out less horrible. It's a cautionary tale. And we just hope at the end that this sort of thing will never happen again. It shouldn't have happened in the first place. It did. But wrongs were righted, and an innocent man did not have his life snuffed out because reasons. Errol Morris, 1988 documentary of the 100% Rotten Tomatoes score, the rare 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, The Thin Blue Line, number 5 in our continuing series of The Best Movie You've Never Seen. This has been episode number 109 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all once again for joining me on this rainy Tuesday. But if you've caught up with this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, flip on those notifications. Give me ideas for some of your films that were maybe under the radar that maybe we have in common that, oh, have you seen this? I feel like a lot of people haven't. All good. If you've caught up with episode 109 on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same rule applies. If you haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode number 110 real soon. Until then,